after which she joined Baker McKenzie and eventually became chair of the firm, and indeed the first woman to be appointed to that position, and later the first woman to become the Minister of France's Minister of the Economy, Finance and Industry, and later Managing Director of the International Monetary Fund. And since 2019, she's been President, as we all know, of the European Central Bank. I also know that some of you here are studying economics, which is what Governor Irodotu studied before joining UBS Investment Bank in London, where he worked for almost all of his investment banking career. In 2014, he came back to Cyprus to take up the role of Commissioner of Privatizations. And since 2019, he's been the Governor of the Central Bank of Cyprus and a member, obviously, of the Governing Council of the European Central Bank. President Lagarde, welcome to Cyprus. If I'm not mistaken, this is your second time this year. I know that you are extremely well informed about the country's banking and economic situation. Have you had a chance to see much of Cyprus before?
Well, first of all, good afternoon to all of you, and it's really nice to be in your company. There are lawyers in this room, so I feel in good company. There are economists in this room. We are a little used to those, but it's effectively my second visit this year. I had come to visit Cyprus at the invitation of my colleague and friend Konstantinos, who is the governor of your National Central Bank, and we spent a couple of days learning a bit for myself about the economic situation, about the general, not so much the banking situation, because I don't think that there was a lot that I had to focus on at the time, but we did have a really good visit. And Konstantinos showed me a little bit of Cyprus. Not a lot, but a bit. And I had visited Cyprus before at the time when I was managing director of the International Monetary Fund, because we had a little bit of history at the time.
Indeed. Both you and Governor Irodotu were appointed in 2019.
Yep.
So you've had, some time to get to know each other. How would you describe your working relationship? It sounds as if it's good.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, perfectly legitimate, but an excellent relationship. Maybe it would be helpful if we explained how we work, actually, because it's, for those of you who have studied the European Central Bank or the Euro system, or who are working and studying economics, you all understand how it works, but maybe not all of you are in that situation. So the European Central Bank acts as the hub, the center, the key gathering of 19 national central banks. National Central Bank of Cyprus being one of them. There will soon be a 20th National Central Bank that will be joining us as of the 1st of January, and that is the National Central Bank of Croatia. So from 1st of Jan onwards, there will be 20 national central banks together with the European Central Bank at its center that form the Euro system. And what we have in common is our currency. We all share the euro and have been doing that ever since the national central banks have joined. And we share the same determination to deliver on the mission that was assigned to us and which is in the treaty, and that really focuses our mind, our analysis and our work on price stability, which is the primary objective that we have to pursue together. So needless to say that we have a lot of work to do. And so how do we work together? Well, we get together, every other week?
Every other week,
Yeah,
yes.
and since COVID, as many things have changed, of course, 2 out of 3 meetings, roughly, are held online, using WebEx or Zoom or whatever. And every 6 weeks, we meet in person for 2 days, working on the analytical work that has been produced by staff. And it's not just the staff of the ECB, it's also the staff of the National Central Bank of Cyprus and of the other 19 banks. And they work on projections, the macroeconomic situation, the financial stability environment, and all that to help us make the decisions that we make every 6 weeks. So yes, we get on very well and we share the same desire to do a good job, really, as a team.
Excellent. I really want to ask you, Governor Erododu, what it's like to be working for someone who is not only in a key position in European banking, but somebody who's been included in the top 10 of the Forbes list of the most powerful women in the world since 2011. Were you slightly intimidated when you first had to meet President Lagarde?
Well, let me add to that that someone came to Cyprus twice this year. John, first, let me give a warm welcome to President Lagarde to Cyprus and a wholehearted thank you for coming back a second time this year together with the Governing Council to have a non-monetary policy meeting tomorrow. President Lagarde has been, since 2019, as you mentioned, John, has been guiding and safeguarding the European economy through unprecedented conditions. To start with, as we all know, the pandemic. We took a number of measures to protect the European economy under President Lagarde's leadership. And now we are in the process of taking a series of measures to fight the inflationary impact of the war. So we are continuing in dealing with those very big challenges. But in addition, let me say one more thing about President Lagarde. She has very high on her agenda climate change, gender equality, and opportunities for the next generation. And ever since I met her at the end of 2019 when she took over at the ECB, she has made sure that these priorities are high on the European agenda. And I think the fact that she is here today with students from the Cyprus universities shows how committed the President is to bring these values across Europe. So, again, a very big welcome and a very big thank you.
Okay, well, the themes that the Governor has just mentioned may well be things that you would like to ask. So let's get on with having the questions from you. All you have to do, raise your hand if you have a question. Somebody will bring you a microphone, and then just tell us your name and your field of study, just so that we know who it is.
Can I add, raise your hand and stand up so we can see you, because otherwise, yes,
Good
much
idea.
better.
Okay, the gentleman there.
Welcome, Madam Lagarde. Basically, I'm from Nepal, and I'm doing PhD in economics at Neapolis University. And my question is like this.
Okay, you checked your telephone.
Yeah, so, for how long do you expect the current level of inflation to persist? And do you expect any further increases? How will the hike in the interest rates affect the unemployment and the vulnerability of the businesses, especially small, medium enterprises? And will there be any assistance extended thereupon? Thank you.
Anybody else got something about inflation?
Yeah.
While we're about to talk about that? Yes, the lady over there. Just one moment for the microphone. Okay.
Thank you. Hello, thank you very much for this very interesting discussion. And I would like to ask Madame Lagarde that after 3 uncertain years of pandemic, inflation is at its highest peak and therefore consumption is at its lowest levels, especially that now winter is coming and consumers are saving their money to pay for their basic needs such as fuel, which is necessary during cold and dark winter days. What strategies will the EU adopt to help member states recover from this economic recession and encourage consumers to open their purses again? Thank you.
Shall we take these two together?
So, yes.
Okay, excellent. So, one thing that you both said is that inflation is very high at the moment. And I think this is something that all members of the Governing Council agree. inflation is undesirably high. We conducted, together with Konstantinos and the other 19 members of the Governing Council, a strategy review that we concluded about a year ago, a little over a year ago, and we decided to revisit a number of things, including particularly taking care of climate change, making sure that we looked at all the components that are in the basket of household to determine inflation, and a few other things, amongst which, what is our target? Because the treaty says price stability as your primary objective. Well, what is the primary objective of price stability? It's for us, Governing Council, to determine. And for many years, it had been defined as close to, but below 2%. And 2%, for those of you who study economics, you know that, is a number and a target that has been generally accepted for multiple reasons that we can discuss. But 2% was the target, but it was close to but below. And there was a lot of uncertainty as to exactly what it was. So we decided that it would be 2%, not close to but below, but 2% in the medium term, because we cannot act from today to tomorrow. Monetary policy acts with a lag time, and symmetric. So that was the objective that we determined at a time when, if you remember back up until December, inflation was negative. Do you remember that? March 20, COVID hit. Everybody is in lockdown. The economy stalls, comes to a halt. We do everything we can to reignite, make sure that money flows, that liquidity is available, that banks do their job, and that the economy does not really fall into free fall and is not accompanied by a financial meltdown. But at the time, December 20, inflation was in negative territory. Okay? So why do I go around this long journey of explaining to you what we've done? Because now it is far from being at 2%, and it is undesirably high, as we have said. Is it at its peak? Difficult to say, and I'm not going to venture there. I think what is far more important is to understand what is behind inflation, what is fueling inflation, to make sure that we have the right monetary policy remedy to address inflation. Because we want to bring it back from where it is now, 9% in Cyprus, right? Which is below the average in the euro area, by the way, yeah? It's a little below. But we want to bring it back from 9% where it is now in Cyprus, back to target, back to our 2% in the medium term. So what's important is what is actually fueling inflation. Why are prices increasing like that? And what is causing it? As Konstantinos said, the war in Ukraine, provoked unjustifiably by Russia, has accelerated the pace by making energy prices much, much higher than anything that we had seen before, by creating these shortages, this lack of confidence, this uncertainty about supply. So that's one cause for it. The second one that is still very active, although fading out a little bit, is what we have called the supply bottlenecks. In other words, strong demand addressed to supply that is not fluid, that is not coming, because the shipping lines are not working well, because people are still under COVID, and so on and so forth. So those are the two key components that are actually fueling these prices that are undesirably high at the moment. So in response to that, what should we do? Well, we should certainly not stimulate demand even more, right? Because if you have this sort of rigid supply caused by lack of shipping, lack of supply, unavailability of goods, if you stimulate demand and demand addresses this rigid supply, you're going to have prices going up even more. So the minimum that we have to do and that's what we started doing back in December of 21, is to stop stimulating demand. And we did that gradually by deciding to stop purchasing assets. Net asset purchases were completely stopped under the pandemic emergency program first, under the asset purchase programs, which were two programs that we had available in order to stimulate the economy, so we stopped that. And then the next thing that we used, which is the most efficient tool to try to fight inflation, we started hiking rates, as you rightly referred to. And that is what a central bank has to do. This is what the treaty tells us to do. This is what the Europeans have tasked us to do. We have to bring inflation back to target in order to deliver on price stability. Because if we let inflation run loose, as famously a central banker said, it's like toothpaste. You know, you press toothpaste out of the tube, try to bring it back in, good luck. Inflation is the same. If you let inflation run loose, to bring it back, you have to fight really hard, and it hurts. Okay? So we have to bring price stability back. That's what we're doing. Now, special programs for SMEs, for instance. This is something that fiscal authorities can focus on, because in the present times, what fiscal authorities have to do is to make sure that they use the fiscal space that they have in order to concentrate on the less privileged, on the most vulnerables, on those that really need help in those dear times, particularly when it comes to energy. So everybody needs to do their job. Monetary policy by the central banks has to restore price stability, and we are doing that, and we will be doing that. Fiscal authorities can use the space that they have in order to help those that need it most. I hope I've addressed your questions, but maybe you can pick up a few additional bribes that I would have missed.
Could I ask Governor Herodota, I was encouraged when you said that Cyprus, inflation in Cyprus is actually slightly below the average. Can you explain why that is?
Sure.
Why we're fortunate in that sense?
Before doing that, just to add a couple of points to what the President said before. Because, of course, to address the vulnerable, that's primarily a fiscal tool. However, let's not forget that achieving price stability is the best protection in the long run for the vulnerable. And also for the SMEs, because as I'm sure you've learned in economics and finance, in order to make investment decisions, you need to have price stability. Otherwise, companies postpone their investment decisions if there is price uncertainty. That's why price stability is such a crucial thing, and this is the role of the central banks, and this is what this is our objective at the ECB. And the other point I wanted to mention, which again the President has addressed, is that supply shocks, when they happen, as they happened because of the war, they are sudden and they appear in almost no time, and they are almost unpredictable. In order for monetary policy to take effect, that takes time. And usually it's roughly 16 to 18 months. That's why the measures we are taking, you may not be seeing the results of those measures immediately. That's how the real economy works, but you will start seeing those results in the medium term, which is what we are targeting. As regards Cyprus, to address your question, John, now Cyprus is a small open economy, which makes it, on the one hand, easily affected by international developments. So, of course, commodity prices affect us like every other country, including the Eurozone. But at the same time, because of our size, and we've demonstrated this a number of times, we are very flexible in terms of how quickly we can adjust certain parameters to deal with these either external shocks, let's say. Let me give you one example, which is tourism. Even though it was expected initially to have a big impact on our economy, actually, the relevant authorities mobilized early enough this year, and they managed to reduce and mitigate the disruption from tourism. The other thing that we have in our favor, and this is not, I would say, by design, it's the nature of things, it's not by strategy, it's the nature of things, is that we don't have dependency on gas prices in Cyprus. Our entire dependency is on oil. And if you compare the impact of the war on gas prices versus on oil, as an importer, because we import oil, the increase in gas prices has been much, much bigger, and it's also has also sustained these higher levels, whereas oil was also impacted, but then it came substantially down afterwards, which that favored our numbers.
Good, good. Okay, some more questions. The gentleman there, up at the front, please, with the mic. Come on.
We can't hear you so well. Maybe you press, yeah.
Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes, yes, great.
Andreas, studying finance in the University of Cyprus, so a bit of change in topics, a bit of a harsh topic perhaps, CBDCs. First, short question, why? Long question is, we've seen that our allies are in the West, and we're becoming yet more and more aligned with Russia. We saw that with Nord Stream 2, and with China. In terms of centralization, we have seen with the plan for CBDCs, we want to have a big brother that's going to control perhaps, or it's the risk perhaps of controlling with the digital euro. We have so many alternatives. Crypto is one, but needs regulation, further regulations through stable coins and stuff, which has started to become through the MiCA regulation only recently. But we have seen a persistence in developing this central bank digital currency directly with the central bank and taking away the positive effects of decentralization and perhaps going into a vastly more centralized model with the people directly with the central bank. And I would like to ask basically, why do you persist so much on that instead of trying to integrate the good stuff? There's obviously some bad stuff with crypto, with more regulation and with the private sector, instead of having a government solution or a super government, in this case the Central Bank of Europe. That's my question. Thanks.
Okay, anybody else got something on cryptocurrencies, digital euro? Yes, the lady there.
It's more popular than inflation.
I think most things are more popular than inflation.
No, you can.
Yes, Sarah, it's you, yes, yes.
Good evening, Madam President. Does the European Central Bank exercise any control over crypto transactions, and how do such transactions affect EU monetary policy? What are the risks, and how does the European Central Bank intend to deal with such risks? Thank you.
Thank you. Shall we?
I think so, yes.
Okay. Maybe we both have a go at that. Thank you for your question, and clearly you know what you're talking about. So that's, I hope I can make myself understand by all of them, but I want to preface my answer to your question with this. I think for everybody it's important to understand the difference between crypto assets, where I would put bitcoins, Ether, and a few others that you know well, and separate from that, the stable coins. So, for me, and I think for us at the ECB, the crypto assets are a category of highly speculative assets, which do not satisfy the three criteria having to do with currency. So I would never call a cryptocurrency. I would call it a crypto asset. We've seen it, you know, it's gone up to thousands and thousands of euros. It went down by thousands and thousands of euros. It's now at around 20-ish thousands. But it's far too volatile and speculative to be regarded as a currency, okay? Whereas stable coins, which only represent about 5% of the entire crypto world, are intended by their creators to be means of payments that hopefully are far more stable and less volatile than the crypto assets that I just talked about. So that's how I look at that universe. Then I look at what people want, because that's what we should be very attentive to. We are providing coins, cash, banknotes, all sorts of things, and cross-border payments amongst our 20 member states in euros and cross-border payments with other institutions around the world. So we have to ask ourselves, given that we are the monetary anchor for the system and, you know, an agent of trust, what is the preference of our clients, our customers around Europe? Is it going to be cash forever? In some countries, possibly. There are countries that are really attached to banknotes, and people still go out to the car dealer and buy their cars with banknotes. It happens. But there are other countries, and I can think of, say, the Netherlands and a few others, where people simply don't want to transact in cash. They want to transact digitally with a currency of their choice, which is the euro. So, if that is the case, and we want to stay as the monetary anchor, we need to adjust. And we cannot just rely on cash, because if in 5 or 10 years from now, the preference that the Dutch are expressing for digital currency spreads out in a much broader way, are we not at risk of losing that role of being the monetary anchor that is used as a reference point? So we must adjust. That's one reason. Second reason we must adjust is that there might be, and you mentioned Russia and China, there might be other countries in the world that would like to take over monetary sovereignty and that have developed CBDC, central bank digital currency, of their own, which they're not really launching on a broad basis. They're experimenting with pilot sites for the moment. But one day, 5 years from now, we could think that they are so far advanced, and much more so than us, that they can then take over. Is that desirable? Probably not, because we want to have our own sovereignty. Third reason, you do have tech companies in particular that are looking at that field thinking, might be interesting, added to which we can monetize the data that we get by understanding who makes payment to whom, who buys at the pharmacist such or such drug, who is doing this or that, and who, as a result, have something which is highly valuable, your data. And we don't think that it is necessarily the future of a currency to be a data provider and a way of monetizing information. So for those three reasons, I believe, and I think we collectively believe, that we must be able, at some stage, somehow, to deliver a digital payment that is safe, secure, free for users, that will never monetize the data that it collects, because we are providing public good. We are not a collector of private data in order to make money. This is not our purpose. Okay? So that's really effectively what we are doing. Is it decentralized or centralized? Decision has not been made. It may very well be that our digital euro is carried on distributed ledger technology. That can well be the case. My conviction is that the settlement function, though, will need to be carried out by the central bank, because the digital euro it's like the banknote that you carry around. We will always, we central bank, we will always honor that payment. So I hope I have addressed your point. On your point on cryptos, the central bank does not control cryptos. We don't control assets. There are other institutions that are in charge of that. I think that in Europe it would likely be ESMA. but more importantly, the institution that really has to regulate the use of such speculative asset in terms of consumer protections, in terms of licensing, in terms of prospectus filing and whatever, is the European Commission. And that's where you talk about MiCA, which is currently being debated. I think there is a quite active debate in Parliament almost as we speak in order to really identify what regulatory environment will apply to cryptos. But this is where the responsibility lies. The regulatory environment is there. We are, by the way, we the Europeans, all of us, we are ahead of the game on that. And we should take credit. The Commission with MiCA, which is this, I can't even say what MiCA is, do you know? Anyway, it's the regulatory framework that applies to cryptos, among other things. We are ahead of the game because the Americans are looking at how they will decide the regulatory framework, and no other country is as advanced as we are. So I think in many ways we are setting the terms a bit like we did for the GDPR, which was also the use of data and protection of data, where we were also ahead of the game. But it's a fascinating field, and one where it's not a question of controlling, it's not a question of centralizing, it's a question of making sure that the monetary anchor that a central bank has to be and the services that it has to provide continue to be provided in an environment where you would prefer to have digital currency. Now, it may well be that we never do that, because if the preference of Europeans is not to have digital currency, we will not launch digital currency. This is something that we governors, members of the Governing Council, will decide probably about a year from now, October 23, when we've concluded the prototypes.
Yes, if I may add a few points. Firstly, and the President said it already, it's not a currency, it's a speculative asset. And what do we mean by that? If we take the euro, the ECB is behind the euro, and it controls the supply of the euro, which impacts the value of the euro together with other variables, like how the economy is doing, etc., which is what happens with any other formal currency. So you will see what the capital flows are in relation to that currency, what the money supply is, how the economy is doing, which determines the capital flows. Therefore, you can, to a certain extent, determine what the value of that might be. What's the value behind any cryptocurrency? There's only one driver, and that's demand. Therefore, it's not a currency. And that's what causes the volatility. It's how much do people want it, and how much and fast people want to get rid of it. And from what I have gathered, at least so far, and here is where the speculation comes in, most people use it in order to get value out of it rather than use it as a form of exchange. Hence, it's also not a currency. Yeah. Fine, yeah. I was focusing on crypto. Stablecoins do have a difference, which is the way they work. But you also mentioned something else, if I understood correctly. The efforts of the ECB in relation to the digital euro is not to exclude or force people not to use crypto. It's an option. It's not to forbid or prohibit crypto. As the President said, we have no control over crypto transactions. We don't get involved in crypto transactions. It's another alternative. And what's that alternative? It's a digital currency that is backed by an authority, and therefore, as the President said, when you go to get the value out of it, it's going to be backed by the ECB. You know you're going to get value out of it. Hence, it's a true currency. But we're still at the stage, or at the design stage, which is a 2-year process that we have initiated. I think we're close at the first year. We'll have 1 more year running, and then we will make various decisions as the outcome of those analyses. And just one final point on how crypto may affect monetary policy. I think that depends a lot on how much it is adopted and its speculative side effects. Why? Because of this high volatility. If you own a crypto coin that has a value of, let's say, $10,000 today and suddenly tomorrow, because it can change that quickly, it has a value of 7,000 or 13,000, then that impacts monetary policy because it impacts the spending ability of people. But again, it's from speculation and no other economic variables. So and there is also no control of supply. Those things come out as long as people break specific algorithms and they get awarded the coin. So there is no control on the supply. The demand side is what drives the value up or down. So you can purely see how the impact on disposable income at least, or how much the supply may change, depending on those algorithms and the adoption. That, of course, may affect the effectiveness of monetary policy. Monetary policy are decisions that we take at the Governing Council, but the effectiveness may be impacted by those variables. I think I'll leave it at that.
No, that's very good. And by the way, because I think we missed that part in your question, what we are doing is not intended to centralize and to keep everything to us, central bank. No, because it's not intended to bypass the banks or the intermediaries and the whole private sector which is interested in distributing the digital euro. You know, just like, you know, if you go to an ATM machine and you get cash out of the machine, commercial banks are involved in that process, and the same will happen with digital euro. So.
Okay, we've had inflation, we've had cryptocurrencies. Let's have another subject. The gentleman there.
Stelios, studying law.
It's for you, President.
Madam President, climate change is accelerating the need of adoption of new, more energy-efficient technologies for firms. However, traditional banking may not always facilitate this process, since providing financing for these technologies may be considered too risky. My question is, how can the European Central Bank help alleviate the problem of climate change through the banking sector? Thank you.
Excellent.
Does anybody else have anything on climate change, which is a major theme, obviously? Okay, the gentleman has asked. Is there somebody else there?
Yes.
Okay, yes.
Good afternoon. My name is Panagiotis. I study law as well. So my question is really similar to the previous persons, yet my viewpoint is on digitalization and how new technologies can facilitate energy transition. And as we're aware, energy transition requires high energy demand, green electrification. So how can the ECB incentivize innovative technologies in that field? Thank you.
You know, on any question related to climate change, no matter how much my heart beats for it, I have to preface any answer with, this is not the core business of a central bank. Okay, so you all heard me, not the central core business of the central bank. It is for governments, it is for parliaments, it is for all of us as actors, and NGOs are very active in that field, but ultimately the decisions that are made are to be made by parliaments and by governments. You know, who is going to decide whether or not a carbon tax is necessary or not? Governments and parliaments. Who is going to agree on the objective of by how much temperature will be tolerated in addition to what we have at the moment? Governments and parliaments. Okay. But it doesn't mean that central banks cannot help. And I think that's what we resolved during our strategy review, that climate change actually matters for essentially two key reasons. One is because climate change affects production, harvest, transportation. Do you know, for instance, that the Rhine River that flows in various European countries could only transport 25% of goods and materials that are normally shipped along the river. Because of the drought, the Rhine had gone down and barges could not be completely loaded. So only 25% of the shipment could go down the Rhine. That's one example. It slows down the traffic. It reduces the kind of output that can be realized. That's an example. If you think about, lots of other things, it affects prices, it affects growth. So it has an impact, and we have to take it into account when we try to analyze the economy and when we try to assess developments. But it also has an impact because, for instance, all of our national central banks in the Eurosystem holds assets because we did buy corporate bonds as part of our asset purchase program. Well, we bought them without necessarily having proper disclosure of the risks associated with the activity of those companies in relation to climate change. What is their future? What is their risk management? What threat is upon them that should actually either minor or major the valuation of those assets in our balance sheets? So for risk management purposes, we also need to take into account climate change. And that is the reason why, starting on the 1st of October, we are now tilting our reinvestment program by giving a particular value to those companies that have a good footprint, that have a good transition plan, among other things. And for those ones, we decide to buy more as part of our investment. For those that don't have a good footprint, that don't have a good transition plan, that do not disclose information about climate change, well, we buy less of them. I think your question goes a little bit further. Should there be specific financing made available at probably most beneficial rates in order to finance the transition to the green economy? And that is something that also needs to be decided by others than the central bank. Although it is tempting to look at that as part of our refinancing schemes, if at all. So, work in progress, but certainly on the disclosure, on the transition scheme, on the footprint, we are now paying close attention, and this is really something that on which we will publish as of the first quarter of 23. And work goes on because we have an action plan that we've all agreed to deliver upon, and for the moment we are on schedule and delivering.
If I may add a couple of comments, and because of the cost of the technologies transitioning into green technologies, let me just, and I'm sure you guys know the answer, right? The cost of mining cryptocurrencies. What is the carbon footprint of that? It's immense. So everybody talks about crypto, but please be aware of how immense their the carbon footprint of mining crypto assets is. To get one coin, it's the equivalent of an electricity consumption of a city. It's immense. So I could not resist the temptation of linking that. But in terms of financing costs to transition and bank financing to transition into green, firstly, as the President said, it is the job of governments, and they can do that either through taxation to penalize the carbon footprint or through subsidies to encourage. But there is an indirect way that the banks over time may come to give better financing terms to greener technologies or companies. And what is that? Part of the ECB is what's called the single supervisory mechanism. Let me explain what that is. Up until the big financial crisis, each European central bank more or less had its own rules in terms of how to supervise its banks. The single supervisory mechanism was created to establish common supervisory rules across all banks. So this is implemented, the same regulation, across all members of the Eurozone. What the SSM, in short, has started to implement is stress tests for the significant institutions, the big banks of each Eurozone member, that are related to climate change. Now, the outcomes of those stress tests at this stage are just informative. In other words, what comes out of those stress tests do not result in specific measures, regulatory measures against the banks, but it's to make the banks to start considering that what is the risk of their balance sheet in terms of carbon exposure and of their loan portfolios, etc. So this way, the banks are beginning to calculate that for the first time, analyze that for the first time, and then in due course, I would expect that they will realize that the impact on their balance sheet of having too much carbon exposure, it's too costly, and then that should result in cheaper financing costs, indirectly, into cheaper financing costs for the greener companies or the greener technologies. So I think that is the route, the indirect route, through which the ECB can influence that. But the primary responsibility is not the ECB, it's on the governments.
Yeah, very
Thank
good
you,
point.
Governor Herodotou. Excuse me. Okay, what else would you like to ask these important people in front of us? The lady over there, sorry, the gentleman there, please.
Good evening, Madam President, Governor. Thank you for this opportunity. My name is Tegios Hadji-Thomas. I'm a lawyer and I'm currently pursuing an LLM at the University of Cyprus. My question to you is a bit more related about the future of Europe, and it can also be linked to the climate change questions. So considering that the ECB's competence is limited to monetary policy in the EU, and the main goal, as you have said, is price stability, how can the ECB monetary policy can be reinvented to address future challenges in the way we work? There are a number of factors to be taken into consideration, which, of course, you are aware of, like unemployment rates, employee well-being, productivity, the energy crisis, the evolution of technology, among others. My direct question will be, would a potential constitutional amendment to the European treaties enable the ECB to tackle these issues more effectively, possibly extending the European Central Bank's competence to include a European fiscal policy or union? And if the answer is in the affirmative, are there any plans to do so? Thank you.
It's a big question, isn't it?
Yeah. I'll tackle the legal part of it, because I think it's, and then maybe you take the monetary, fiscal, and you know, constitutional reform. I think what you are thinking of, and you know, allow me to put words to your thoughts, is the mandate. Is the mandate of the ECB the right mandate, and should it be expanded? Should it be different? There are other mandates around in other parts of the world. And I would say two things. First of all, it's incredibly difficult to get a constitutional change in order to modify the treaty. And it's not for us poor central bankers to assess the political feasibility. But what I've heard political leaders, particularly in the days when I was finance minister myself, what I've heard them say is, don't touch the treaty, it's too complicated, it will take forever, we will not get there. So, feasibility, highly questionable. Number two, in the context of what we have, do we have enough flexibility so that we can actually take into account some of the factors that you have referred to? And I would contend that the answer to that is yes. Because we have a primary objective, which is clearly stated in the treaty as price stability. But in the same breath of air, you have secondary objectives, which include in particular the economic purposes developed and pursued by the other European institutions. So while I believe that, for instance, climate change is part and parcel of the primary objective because it helps us deliver price stability, I also think that on the secondary objective, we can certainly include the issue of climate change, where there is a complete alignment of institutions where, Parliament, Council, Commission, all of them believe that we have to deliver on that. So through that secondary objective, which is, and you're a lawyer, you will understand what I'm saying here, it's without prejudice to the first primary objective. So we have to deliver on the primary objective, come what may. But if it doesn't prejudice the primary objective, we can very well pursue the secondary objectives. So I would personally, if it was my competence, which it is not, I would not chase a treaty change. I would explore the boundaries of what can be done within the framework of what we have. I think the founding fathers of the treaty had something pretty smart in mind, and we have to take advantage of that smartness of theirs.
The technical side, at least the way we approach it at the Governing Council, was how I was going to approach the technical side of the equation, which is the following. When we make monetary policy decisions, they may result in interest rate setting and other monetary policy tools. But in order to arrive at such decisions, the amount of analysis and the variables and the data that are being considered by all the members of the Governing Council cover various parts of the economy, the stakeholders, including unemployment, exchange rate, economic growth, and many other factors. So even though our primary objective, as said, is price stability, in order to determine the best way to achieve that, you do take into account in every analysis, every time, every 6 weeks, as we said at the beginning, what's happening with unemployment, what's happening with economic growth, and not only within the Eurozone. We try to analyze that in other major economies because what's happening to them affects the Eurozone. So we also look at what's happening in the US, in the UK, in China, in Japan, from an economy perspective, how that will impact also the Eurozone in those variables in order to set our monetary policy, which is price stability. So the answer I would have is that indirectly, all these variables are part of price stability at the end of the day because they are part of the economy. And they are taken into account, and we do get all this analysis every 6 weeks. And the President also described it at the beginning, how it works, because all the national central banks, which is the central bank of each Eurozone member, is a member of the ECB. We all participate in relevant committees of the ECB that analyze this data. We all provide our country data to the ECB, hence we look at these dynamics across the Eurozone. And this filter up into a Eurozone analysis, but it's like a bottom-up aggregation of all this data and analysis.
Yep.
Okay.
Question out of this.
Sure, yeah, this lady here.
If you stand up, then the microphone comes to you right away. That's the best thing to do.
Okay. Good evening to everyone. My question is simple and common, I think, and I wonder if there is a solution for that. It's about the opportunities that the new generation has. I want to mention that the Cyprus youth feels insecure in the professional sector. It is not easy for us to find a stable job with good earning. I wonder if there are any ways to improve this difficult situation?
I'm sure that some of you, I purposely mentioned, and I fear that I caused her a little bit of embarrassment when I mentioned that she's such a powerful woman and what Forbes said. But I'm sure that there are a lot of you, and especially the girls and the women here, who would like to know something about how President Lagarde actually came to be who she is. And I don't mean only the position, but what it was that allowed her, if you like, to reach the positions that she did. I know that some of you, we had a chat earlier, were sort of interested in asking her about leadership and the position of women. I don't know if anybody actually has a straight question about this. Are you putting your hand up there? Yeah, please do. But I think that it's something that we would like to hear, even though it may be slightly more personal than you want to say.
I think
it works.
It does, okay. I think especially considering that the Diversity, Equality and Inclusion Charter has been launched recently, and the scholarships that are provided by the ECB to women, especially, how do you believe that women can contribute to the ECB, and from your personal experience, how can women be more encouraged to take part in more leadership roles? Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to ask you a question. Who in this room wants to be one day a leader? Stand up.
That's quite enough.
Yes, I think that's fantastic. It starts as like that. You have to realize, I was one of you, okay? And I wasn't born with a golden spoon in my mouth. But I was one of you. And I was not going to let others decide for me that I would be, don't get me wrong, I'm not a spring chicken. So that was 45 years ago. But I was not going to let anybody decide for me that I would be submissive, doing human relationship or marketing at best, but nothing more than that. So I think that the fact that you are prepared to stand up and to say, yes, I have confidence in what I can do, and yes, I want to be a leader one day, and yes, I have the ambition to do that, I think it is fantastic. And I think that you should remember always, maybe not this moment, but if I was you, I would. Because it takes guts to stand up and to say, yes, of course I want to be a leader one day. Why not? And I would strongly encourage you to explore inside yourself that little leader which will grow over the course of time. So you ask me, what does it take to become a leader in the corporate world first for 20 years and and what I've done. I think we should be under no illusion it takes hard work. I mean, it's been your case, it's been my case. It doesn't happen just like that. Okay, you can make a little capital gains on cryptos one day, you will lose it the following days, but it's not going to keep you at the top of the tree forever, for sure. So it is about hard work. It is about energy. I've said that before, but it's also about confidence. The confidence that you have in yourself, the confidence that you are prepared to give to others, and the risks that you are prepared to take. There will be times when you are sort of comfortably settled in a particular position, got a nice and secure job, and suddenly an opportunity comes by. La fortuna. What do? Do you say yes? Or do you sit back comfortably where it's okay and settled? Well, now and again, you have to take the risk. You have to grab the hair of Madame Fortuna, go with it, and be prepared to fail. Yes, I have failed in my life, believe me. It looks like a rosy journey of success. I have failed many times. But what I have never done is refuse to take risk. And I would strongly encourage you to do that. Be confident, know that you can fail, but you're going to bounce back and you're going to do something else. Now, is it easy? No. Should you be prepared to go somewhere else? Yes. Should you be prepared to start your own business? Yes. Should you be prepared to sometimes ask for help around? Yes. So it's a combination of confidence and a degree of humility as well. Because we all start not at the highest, but at the lowest, and you climb up. When I was a baby lawyer at Baker McKenzie, I did thousands of translations. You know, I was a fully qualified lawyer and I had passed the bar exam and all the rest of it. But for at least 2 years, I was given translations to do. And I was, you know, grinding my teeth and thinking, my goodness, why do I have to do translations? And a top-notch partner came one day to tell me, this is the way to learn the job. It might be below your level, but this is how you learn the job. And we have to take that and to learn from those moments. Final piece of advice, and I know I sound like a patronizing mother or something like that, but I have children, so I do talk to them as well on that. You will learn from all the people that you interact with. Not just from me, not just from John, not just from Konstantinos, but from people of all walks of life. Even people that you think are sort of not that great, not that well educated, not that high level, you will learn from them. So have that openness of mind to learn from them. But have confidence in yourself. That's critically important. And remember the moment when you decided to stand up and to say, yes, I want to be a leader. That day will come again. And you will stand up again, even those who remain seated.
I think that is a perfect way and a perfect message of ending this session today. We've actually gone over the time. Let's all give a round of applause, please, to President Lagarde. I hope you will, as she said, I hope you will remember this moment or this day, and maybe it will come back to us all in the future. Thank you all for coming today. It's been a pleasure to be here with you, and good luck to all of you. Thank you.
Inversión, bolsa, criptomonedas. En Krolus TV no te vendemos cursos, te contamos las noticias que mueven el mercado. De lunes a jueves a las 3 p.m. hora española, el mejor y más útil programa de inversión y trading de habla hispana.
Vengo a presentar un programón
en directo, con las noticias que mueven el mercado y con la conducción de José Basagoiti, CEO de Trading Pro. Cada día podrás ver la operativa en vivo de José Basagoiti y sus invitados. No te lo pierdas y podrás hacer tus consultas sobre acciones y criptomonedas en directo. De lunes a jueves a las 3 p.m. hora española en Krolus TV. Puedes vernos en YouTube, Fire Stick de Amazon y pronto en la televisión de tu país.